What is leader? The one who leads in right direction is the leader. So I think Sanjay Gandhi was a leader, Indira Gandhi was a leader, Rahul Gandhi was a leader, Sonia Gandhi was a leader. But I'm not satisfied though that whether Rahul Gandhi has qualified to be a leader.
From Ratnagiri railway station was where this person named Shauk Sethi was picked up. He was in fact absconding ever since the incident on April 2nd. But when his location was traced, there were inquiries that were made, and it was found that he was in a civil hospital where he was getting a treatment for his injuries. Which is why now what we see is that depending on his situation, he'll be produced in the local court asking for a transit remand, following which he'll be taken to Kerala for further investigation. Currently, he's in the custody of RPF Ratnagiri, and the investigation would continue. In fact, his interrogation is on right now, and very soon we understand that Kerala police will also be reaching Ratnagiri to take his custody. Yes.
We have security analyst Patikrit Payne joining us. Mr. Payne, good morning. So, major development in the Kerala train fire case. The absconding accused has now been nabbed in Ratnagiri. How do you see this development?
Well, good morning. It will take some time for the investigating agencies to find out the actual motive behind it. But in today's era of social media playing a role in terms of indoctrination, it is not necessary that every potential act of terror would have some kind of a link with a terror organization. Somebody can get indoctrinated on his own and actually trigger a lone wolf attack. What we also witnessed that if in case it has any terror angle or an objective which is subversive in nature and not a personal grudge, what is worrying are the patterns and the dimensions in which how it is changing. Perhaps there are no more use of high intensity explosive material that is being replaced by other kind of inflammable products which might be readily available and for any kind of activity like this. It is a worrisome nature. Probably it is not easy for any security agency to prevent every attack like this. But where the radicalization is taking place, why people are moving towards certain elements are moving towards that kind of direction, it requires a thorough investigation.
Shahrukh Saifi is the one who set his co-passengers on fire in a Kerala train, and now he has been nabbed by the police. He was absconding and now he has been nabbed in Ratnagiri. He was at a civil hospital in Ratnagiri where he was undergoing treatment for his injuries, and now he has been nabbed by the police. Remember, he was the one who had set his co-passengers on fire in a Kerala train, and two of them even died. A woman and a 2-year-old child even died in that incident while jumping off the train. And now the accused has been nabbed in Ratnagiri by the police. CNN News 18's Anvit is joining us to give us more details on this. Anvit, can you tell us more about Shahrukh, who has now been nabbed by the police in Ratnagiri?
See, it is being said that it was in the intervening night of 4th and 5th April that Shahrukh Saifi, who was the prime accused as per the Kerala police, he has been arrested. It was a joint team of Central Intelligence and Maharashtra ATS that have managed to nab Saifi. And he had been absconding ever since the incident took place on Sunday, where he had allegedly sprayed some inflammable liquid on the passengers of the train and then had set them afire. Now, yesterday his location was traced to Ratnagiri, and inquiries at the hospital in Ratnagiri revealed that Shahrukh was at Ratnagiri Civil Hospital for his treatment for the injuries that he had received, because he had, while escaping, he had jumped out of a running train, and that is why he had received some injuries, and he was getting treatment at Ratnagiri at the civil hospital. But when the teams reached there, he managed to, ran away from the hospital without getting complete treatment. However, subsequently, extensive searches were made for him in Ratnagiri area, and finally, Shahrukh was located with the help of technical surveillance and the team joint operations of the police, and he was arrested. Now, currently, it's being said that he is under the custody of the RPF Ratnagiri, and his interrogation is yet to start, after which his antecedents will be confirmed, and it will also be confirmed if he's the same man, because the police had been making many raids in Delhi, Noida, UP and other areas also, as it had been confirmed that this man belongs to UP, and since then raids are being made. Many other people had also been detained, who had similar names or had any possible connection with this incident. So this man has now been taken into custody, and questioning will soon begin, is what we believe.
All right, Anvit, we also have Neetu with us. Neetu, now that the absconding accused Shahrukh Saifi has been nabbed, what next for him?
See, he'll definitely be brought back to Kerala because the case has been registered in Kerala, and it's not just the Kerala police, but it's not just the Kerala police that has been involved in this. According to Manoj Gupta's information, that he has been nabbed by the Maharashtra ATS there. So,
Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost, and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Donald Trump faces 34 charges. From former president, he's now a defendant. He has many infamous firsts to his name, but this is a serious legal battle. Can he survive it? More importantly, can he weaponize it to win sympathy ahead of the next presidential election? He says this is election interference. We'll discuss. French President Macron is in China today, trying to forge a middle path, trying to not get caught up in the US-China battle, but betraying Europe's confusion over China. Meanwhile, India is turning to Africa, tapping into the big arms bazaar there. Indian defense supplies are finding many takers in Africa. We'll tell you about the latest win in Made in India in defense. In West Asia, sports is the new money spinner. Some numbers put this trend in perspective. Taiwan's president is landing in the US tonight and holding meetings despite China's warnings. We'll talk about all of this and more. The headlines first. After nearly 8 years, Iran names an ambassador to the United Arab Emirates. This move signals a thaw in ties between the Gulf states. It comes after Iran and Saudi Arabia announced restoration of diplomatic ties last month. Former Scottish First Minister Nicola Sturgeon's husband has been arrested. Peter Murrell has been held in a probe into the Scottish National Party's finances. This case relates to funds raised by the party to hold a second independence referendum. Sturgeon's husband is the former chief executive of the SNP. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky visits Poland. The neighboring country is one of Kiev's closest allies. Poland has been urging NATO members to increase military supplies to Ukraine. It has also accepted more than 1 million refugees from Ukraine. Foxconn's billionaire founder will run for Taiwan's presidency again. Terry Gu says he is running to quote-unquote avoid a war with China. He stepped down as Foxconn's chief in 2019. Taiwan will elect its next leader in January 2024. Japan battles its worst ever bird flu outbreak as egg prices soar. More than 17 million birds have been killed in just this season. The situation is so grim that Japan is running out of space to bury the dead chickens. And Germany steps up surveillance on Apple for possible abuse of its market position. Its antitrust watchdog opens the door for future curbs on the tech giant. Amazon, Alphabet and Meta are already under close scrutiny in Germany. $34. That's the number of charges against Donald Trump. Not one, not two, but 34. For the former president, America is now a nation in decline and a third world country.
I never thought anything like this could happen in America. Never thought it could happen. Incredibly, we are now a failing nation. We are a nation in decline.
Trump took to social media too. On his app Truth Social, he said, and I'm quoting, "This seems so surreal. Wow, they're going to arrest me. Can't believe this is happening in America." And this is what he was talking about. It's one for the history books. This is the moment when Donald Trump was charged. The first time in American history a former president was slapped with criminal charges. This is Donald Trump sitting before a judge inside a criminal court with his legal team. And it was a strange day for him. He was at the center of attention again, but not in the way that he's used to. Moments before this picture was taken, Donald Trump appeared before a district attorney. He was arrested, his fingerprints were taken, and he was produced before a judge. Then Trump was allowed to go home. But this is just the beginning of his legal troubles. What's happening in America is truly unprecedented. For the first time, a former president has been arrested. He's facing criminal charges. Donald Trump, of course, says he's not guilty. His case will begin soon, and these hearings will test America's democracy. Next year, the US will pick its next president. There is a presidential election, and the case against Donald Trump could define that race. Will he gain support from this legal scrutiny? Or will this case push Donald Trump into political oblivion? It's hard to say, really. But here are the facts of the case, starting with the charges against Trump. Technically, there are 34 charges, but fundamentally, this case has been built on two pillars. Donald Trump is accused of orchestrating a hush money scheme. It paved the way for his presidency. And once Trump was inside the White House, he tried to cover up the scheme. What is the basis of these charges? Donald Trump apparently had an affair with a porn star called Stormy Daniels in 2006. In 2016, Trump made payments to her, a total of $130,000. And what was this payment for? To remain silent. Apparently, Daniels wanted to speak out. She wanted to sell her story to the media, but Trump's lawyer intervened. His name is Michael Cohen. He was Trump's lawyer then. And he paid Stormy Daniels $130,000. She was asked to keep quiet, and she did. 12 days later, Trump won the 2016 election. And all these years later, the hush money payment has landed him in trouble. Trump is accused of falsifying his business records. He reimbursed Cohen for the $130,000 payment, but in his own account books, Donald Trump showed this as legal fee. And that's a lie. And that is why there's a case against him today. Here's how the prosecutor described the case against Donald Trump.
Everyone stands equal before the law. No amount of money and no amount of power changes that enduring American principle. The defendant repeatedly made false statements no matter who you are. We cannot and will not normalize serious criminal conduct.
So what happens next? The proceedings will be a long, drawn-out process. When is the next hearing? 4th of December. It's still far away. The trial will begin in January 2024. It could extend well into the presidential election in the US, and it could go on well beyond that election too. And what happens if Trump is found guilty? At this point, it could go anywhere. Donald Trump could face a fine, or he could go to prison. The maximum prison sentence in such cases is 4 years. But will that stop Trump from running in 2024? Not at all. Even if Trump, as president, goes to jail, the law allows him to run the government from behind bars. That is, of course, if Trump becomes president again. So guilty or not guilty, he can contest the election and he can remain in public office. Which brings us to the next question. Can he win this election? How will this case impact his chances? Will he still have a mass following in the US? As of today, Donald Trump's core supporter base looks intact. They are behind him. Yesterday, he tried to provoke them by painting himself as a political martyr. He says the charges against him amount to election interference.
Our elections were like those of a third world country. And now this massive election interference at a scale never seen before in our country. They attacked me with an onslaught of fraudulent investigations. Russia, Russia, Russia. Ukraine, Ukraine, Ukraine. Impeachment hoax number one. Impeachment hoax number two. The illegal and unconstitutional raid on Mar-a-Lago right here.
As president, Donald Trump survived 2 impeachments, and that too was a first for any US president. Now he's been charged. Can he win this legal battle? Donald Trump is banking on his supporters to ride this storm. And speaking of storms, France is in the middle of one. There's been a wave of protests. This is what France has looked like for weeks now. People are angry with the French president. And where is the president? He landed in China today. Beijing has rolled out a red carpet for President Emmanuel Macron. And the timing is worth noting. His own country is burning over pension reform, and his top ally, the US, is at odds with China, and that's putting it mildly. Their relations have hit rock bottom. But Macron does not want to get caught up in this. He wants Europe to take the middle path, and he's leading the way. And this betrays Europe's confusion vis-a-vis China. They want to run with the hares and hunt with the hounds. They want to ban Chinese app TikTok, but they want to take business delegations to Beijing. They talk about decoupling with China. They want to reduce dependence on China for critical raw materials like lithium, but they also want to engage with China. European leaders are making a beeline for Beijing. It began last year when China reopened its doors to the world. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz was the first one to go. Last week, Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez was in Beijing. And this week, French President Emmanuel Macron is there. With him is the EU chief, Ursula von der Leyen. And Beijing is making a clear distinction between the two. China says Macron is on a state visit on China's invitation, while von der Leyen is merely visiting. But what are they doing there? You could say Europe is suffering from a case of FOMO, the fear of missing out. They want to shun China, but they also want China, and the war in Ukraine has given them an excuse. This is China's smokescreen of mediation. Xi Jinping wants to broker peace. Last month, he went to Russia and presented a peace plan. Putin liked it, but as expected, the West trashed it.
Of course, we did not ignore the situation around Ukraine. We believe that many of the provisions of the peace plan put forward by China are consonant with Russian approaches and can be taken as the basis for a peaceful settlement when they are ready for that in the West and in Kiev.
So the peace plan was China's bait, and Europe happily took it. For months, the Europe-China relationship has been in a deep freeze. That's because China was backing Russia in the war. So Europe cut engagement, but now it wants to talk, and the peace plan is a good place to start, also a good alibi. So European leaders are rushing to China. They want to weigh in on Xi Jinping's peace plan. They want to make it look like a noble mission to pursue peace for Ukraine, and not really about business deals for their countries. Last week, Spain's Prime Minister made an appeal.
I have also encouraged President Xi to have a conversation with President Zelensky to learn firsthand about the peace plan of the Ukrainian government.
He is encouraging Xi Jinping to talk to Zelensky. Expect Macron and von der Leyen to say the same. Do they really think China can deliver peace? Well, they do. But in typical European fashion, they've decided China can only be a facilitator and not a mediator. Listen to this.
It is clear that China should use its great influence on Putin to speed up the diplomatic negotiation. China cannot be a mediator because it's on one side, but it can be a facilitator.
Not a mediator, but a facilitator. Brussels has assigned a role for Beijing. And it's using this to engage with China. Leading the effort, like I said, is Emmanuel Macron. He wants to define Europe's China policy. He says Europe should not have to pick a side. If the US and China are fighting, Europe should be able to walk the middle path. And Macron has been making this pitch for a while. Last year he said, we need a single world order.
China, precisely, has proposed a peace plan. We welcomed it. But do we agree on all of it? No. Nevertheless, it proves a will to engage in the resolution of the conflict.
Un chemin de paix. Et la Chine, justement, a proposé un plan de paix.
But for any of this to materialize, he must first bridge the divides within the European Union. There are leaders who do not agree with Macron's approach. Like Lithuania's foreign minister, he says France should proceed with caution. In fact, let me quote from his statement. This is what he said. We should remember that attempts to contain Russia by offering economic partnership failed. Putin was in fact emboldened by our flexibility, not persuaded. Similar tactics would also embolden China. He has a point. But the West, including the US, for the longest time has made this mistake. They see China as part of the solution rather than the problem. They're attracted by the business and they lose sight of the strategic challenges. The US woke up to this only recently. Europe is still sitting on the fence.
It is clear that our relations have become more distant and more difficult in the last few years. We've seen a very deliberate hardening of China's overall strategic posture for some time.
We're waiting to see what Xi says on Chinese soil and what Macron says and does. He doesn't want to make a choice, but when you're an American ally and a junior partner, not making a choice is often not a choice. Also, it's worth tracking China's response. Talking to Europe will help Xi Jinping. He's being increasingly isolated and slammed for his policies. This visit, or visits like these, may change some of it. In the UK, the Home Secretary is in the headlines. Suella Braverman is in the eye of the storm again. She's taking on British Pakistani men. She blames them for child sexual abuse. She says they're quote-unquote overwhelmingly behind such cases. This is about organized groups, also called grooming gangs. Braverman says men of Pakistani origin are involved in these crimes and that authorities willfully ignore this. You may ask why. She says it's because they're trying to be politically correct. That's what the Home Secretary says. She says that law enforcement agencies are being politically correct. They take a softer approach to minorities like Muslims. And a Home Secretary is the UK's version of Home Minister. She says the police is soft because they don't want to be called bigots. Now that's a lot to unpack. And not the first time it has been said in the UK that law enforcement agencies overcompensate because they don't want to be called racist. Let me give you some context. Grooming gangs are an old issue in the UK. The theory is this: gangs of British Pakistani men roam about abducting and abusing minor white girls. There have been some very high-profile cases, like cases in Rochdale, Oxford and Telford. And British Pakistani men were involved in these cases, but they weren't the only ones. Braverman's own ministry investigated this. The UK Home Ministry released a report in 2020 and it found, and I'm quoting, group-based offenders are most commonly white. So Braverman is being slammed. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has come to her defense. His official spokesperson has made a statement. He said that British Pakistanis were linked to some grooming gangs and that this was the problem she was trying to highlight. The spokesperson then doubled down on the problem of political correctness. He said it should not hold people back from taking appropriate action. And this is the second time this year that political correctness is in the crosshairs. It came up earlier with the Prevent report. Now, what's that? What is the Prevent report? The UK has a program called Prevent. It's basically to prevent radicalization. Citizens are urged to keep an eye out for signs of radicalization, and if they find any suspicious activity, they should report it. This is the Prevent program. It came under scrutiny recently because the UK saw a lot of high-profile extremist attacks. In 2021, for instance, an MP was killed. His name was Sir David Ames. And he was killed by a man who had been flagged off to Prevent. So people wanted to know if this program was actually working. Was it of any use? The government appointed a reviewer to assess it. And the review report came out in February. It slammed the program. The report said it was only funding generic community projects. It was not focusing on religious extremism. 8 out of 10 plot investigations in the UK were linked to radical Islam. but prevent. The government program was failing to prevent them. Because there was, quote unquote, a culture of timidity when it came to tackling radical Islam. All this begs the question, is political correctness really stopping law enforcement? And in the case of the UK, it seems a bit contradictory because a lot of reports say law enforcement in the UK also has a racial bias. So maybe this political correctness is an overcompensation for years of racist policing. And that too is problematic. You see, no country can afford to go soft on heinous crimes like child sexual abuse or radicalization. In an ideal world, there should be no biases. Is that what Suella Braverman is truly after? An ideal society with no institutional biases and migrants enjoying the good life in Rwanda? Seems like a stretch. But remember, local elections are approaching in the UK. They're scheduled for early May. The ruling Conservative Party is trailing in opinion polls, so the Tories are trying to find ways to rally their support base. Braverman's words are being linked to this. She's been accused of dog whistling. But whatever the case may be, whatever her motivations, we say biases should not hamper justice. And we mean biases of any kind, racism or political correctness. Meanwhile, India is making a major push into Africa. India is wooing Africa, and this time with weapons. This story is about India's foray into the African arms bazaar. Last week, India invited the army chiefs of more than 30 African nations, 30 nations. The idea was to pitch made-in-India defense equipment. African military leaders got a chance to inspect Indian helicopters, drones, and artillery. And India is hoping that they'll come back as buyers. Why Africa, though? Why is India projecting itself as a defense supplier to Africa? Because there's a gap, there's a market. Africa cannot afford expensive military supplies. It wants cheap arms. And that's how India is positioning itself, a supplier that gives value for money. It's already found takers. Some African countries have started buying arms from India, like Egypt, Ethiopia, Mozambique, Mauritius, and the Seychelles. And what are they buying? We don't have the specifics, but reports say a little less than 20% of India's arms exports go to Africa. Some deliveries have been made this year, like these military trucks. They were built by India for the Royal Moroccan Army. And how many trucks did Morocco buy? Nearly 100. There's another reason why Africa is interested in Indian wares. It's because of India's collaborative approach. India is committed to not just supplying arms to Africa, it is also helping the region build its own capacities. Last week, India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh spoke about this. He addressed the African defence chiefs and he promised support to Africa's defence industry. Let me quote from what he said. The Indian defence industry can work with you to fulfill your defence requirements with the aim to empower our African friends to indigenously meet their defence requirements. We are also committed to sharing our expertise and knowledge in defence manufacturing, research and development. What more can India offer? In recent years, India has overcome its hesitation on defence exports. In fact, it has been actively pushing made-in-India weapons like advanced towed artillery guns, the BrahMos missile, the Akash missile system, armoured vehicles and light combat helicopters, just to name a few. Recently, India has been courting Southeast Asia too. Major deals have been signed. Countries like the Philippines have bought the BrahMos missile. Indonesia, Vietnam, Malaysia, Thailand and Myanmar have also expressed interest. Last year, reports said South Africa was also keen on buying the BrahMos. In 2022, South Africa organized the Africa Aerospace and Defence Expo. It happened in Cape Town. The makers of the BrahMos were present there. They'd set up a pavilion. So Indian defence equipment is generating a lot of interest in Africa. And this serves two purposes: defence sales for India and deeper ties with Africa, including defence ties. In fact, military drills are being stepped up. In the month of March, India hosted a major joint exercise, the Africa-India Field Training Exercise, or AF-INDEX. It was a 10-day-long exercise. Militaries of 24 African countries participated. And what did they focus on? Humanitarian mine assistance and United Nations peacekeeping operations. So India's influence in Africa is growing, although Russia still remains the dominant force in the region. Russia is the largest supplier of weapons to Africa. In sub-Saharan Africa, Russia has a 26% market share. But the war in Ukraine has distracted Russian defense contractors. They're prioritizing the Russian military, and for obvious reasons. Even deliveries to India from Russia are now running late. And this might force African militaries to look for alternatives. India is clearly at a vantage point. And this is yet another opportunity for Make in India in defense. Now let's talk about Russian President Vladimir Putin. He's been called a lot of things like paranoid, someone who has, and I'm quoting, lost touch with the world and is pathologically afraid for his life. These are the words of a former Russian officer. His name is Gleb Karakulov. He defected last year, so take his assessment with a pinch of salt. But his comments are making waves because this man was no ordinary officer. He was part of Putin's secretive elite personal security service. He was quite high up in the ranks. And he is now Russia's highest ranking defector ever. This man has gone public. He's making some big claims. He's sharing intimate details of Vladimir Putin's life and disclosing potentially classified information. Listen to this.
Our president is cut off from the world. He lives in an information vacuum. In the last couple of years, he spends most of his time in his residences, which media outlets very eloquently call his bunkers. He is pathologically afraid for his life. He has surrounded himself with an impenetrable barrier of quarantine and a lack of any information from the internet.
These are strong words. He also says Putin has, quote-unquote, shut himself off from the world, and there are all kinds of barriers. He quarantines himself. He's scared of COVID. And before meeting him, you have to be quarantined for at least 2 weeks. Then there is what he calls the information vacuum. Apparently, the Russian president avoids using a cell phone. He doesn't use the internet either. So what's his source of information? His inner circle and state TV news channels. That's all that he depends on, apparently. Also, his paranoia seems to have gotten worse since the war in Ukraine began. Putin now reportedly orders bomb shelters for himself.
In October, when I was in Kazakhstan, in addition to the secured phone that we had already installed in the ambassador's office, we installed another phone in a bomb shelter. To be honest, I don't understand why this was done. It is probably already an instance of some kind of paranoia.
And his so-called paranoia even involves airplanes. And we are not referring to flying anxiety, because how can we forget this? We are talking about safety issues. Vladimir Putin now travels on a special armored train. Recently, visuals of his sprawling ski lodge emerged. It's outside the city of Sochi. It boasts of a pickle pantry, a herbal sauna, and a missile defense system. You heard that right. Putin's luxury complex has its own missile defense system. Now, that's called vacationing in style. So you may agree with Karakulov when he says, and I'm quoting again, Putin's take on reality has become distorted. He's also called the president a war criminal.
I consider this man Putin a war criminal. Although I did not participate specifically in these military activities, I do not consider it possible for me to carry out his criminal orders or even to be in his service. For me, this would be too big of a deal for my conscience. I am not ready for this.
But why is this man speaking now? The defector played a crucial role on Putin's side. He was involved in encrypting the leader's communications. He accompanied him to 180 trips in the past 13 years. 180 trips. Must have been a very close aid. And now he's suddenly speaking the language of the West.
He's clearly committed war crimes.
Holding Russian leaders to account for the atrocities they are committing in Ukraine is our collective priority.
This begs the question, is the former Putin aide now aiding the West? Because his account generally conforms with what the West has been saying. And the picture they've been trying to paint over the years, showing Vladimir Putin as once charismatic, but now growing increasingly isolated and unfit to lead a nation. Every once in a while, the Western press carries headlines and speculative stories on Putin's illness. They talk about body doubles and surgeries and Putin taking a fall. There's a lot of speculation, and a lot of it is agenda-driven. So this account could be an exaggeration, but then again, lies flourish where facts are hard to come by. Vladimir Putin has a carefully crafted image of a strong leader. He's been using the domestic press to his advantage for decades. This interview may or may not dent his image, but the details this man has shared will hurt his security for sure. So far, Russia has not commented on any of these statements. Tensions are spiraling in Israel, and this time I'm not talking about Netanyahu's judicial reform, the one that led to mass protests. I'm referring to more traditional tensions, like the divide with Palestine. Jews are celebrating the festival of Passover, and this year it coincides with the month of Ramadan. And so, what should have been a time for celebration has turned into a violent slugfest. What's worse is that this is happening at a shrine considered sacred by both Muslims and Jews, the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem, the holiest site in Judaism, the third holiest in Islam. It has become a site for violent confrontation again. Israeli police raided this complex this morning. Our next report tells you why.
This is what the Al-Aqsa Mosque looked like this morning. The Israeli police entered the mosque before dawn on Wednesday. Police officers clashed with worshippers. Israel says the raid was in response to recent Palestinian rioting. An Israeli statement said the worshippers were armed with fireworks, stones and sticks. As police officials raided the mosque, fireworks were used against them. And, as is the case with all things Israeli and Palestinian, there are two versions to this story. Israel claims the worshippers were chanting violent slogans. They locked the doors of the mosque from inside and also set up fortifications and obstacles at the entrance. Israel has released footage of the aftermath of the raid. Its forces filmed the fireworks found inside the Al-Aqsa Mosque. If Israeli claims are true, the worshippers have some explaining to do. For starters, why were they hoarding fireworks, stones and sticks inside the mosque? Scenes outside were just as chaotic. There was tension in the air. The Al-Aqsa Mosque is an emotive issue for Palestinians, and every time Israel raids the site, it touches a raw nerve. This is when an Israeli bus rammed into a Palestinian car. Palestinians gathered in support of the mosque and the worshippers inside it. They chanted slogans while Israeli forces set up barriers on the road. Now, the Palestinians have a different version of what happened. They say Israeli forces raided the mosque without cause and attacked innocent worshippers, leaving several injured. A Palestinian lawyer claims that Israel has detained over 500 Palestinians. Worshippers who were in the mosque when the raid occurred described what they saw. In the yard to the eastern part of the compound, the police were firing tear gas and stun grenades. It was a scene that I can't describe. Then they stormed in and started beating everyone, and they detained people, and they put young men on their faces to the ground. They also beat them while in detention. Palestine was joined by Saudi Arabia, Jordan and Egypt, all of whom condemned Israel's actions. Saudi Arabia went a step further. It said Israel's storming of the Al-Aqsa Mosque has undermined peace efforts, a significant setback for Israel there, considering it wants to normalize relations with Riyadh. Some groups decided to take matters into their own hands. Palestinians in the West Bank reacted furiously, and Hamas, the militant organization that controls the Gaza Strip, launched rockets at Israel. Israel responded with ground-shaking airstrikes which hit Hamas training camps and weapon depots.
The Al-Aqsa Mosque has seen several violent clashes over the years. In 2021, clashes at the mosque triggered a 10-day war between Israel and Hamas. For the Palestinians, the mosque is a sign of resistance, their culture and nationhood. It's the third most sacred shrine in Islam, and Muslim worshippers aren't willing to share it.
Al-Aqsa Mosque, despite all what is going on, is purely for Muslims and cannot be shared. Everything that is going on and happening by force will never be legitimate.
Jews consider the complex one of the most sacred shrines. Ownership of the mosque remains a contentious issue, one that sparks frequent clashes. The past 1 year has been the deadliest in over 2 decades. Israeli forces have made thousands of arrests in the West Bank. Reports say at least 250 Palestinians have been killed. Meanwhile, attacks by Palestinians have killed more than 40 Israelis. The situation is volatile. They've gone to war over the Al-Aqsa Mosque before.
And while Israel and Palestine continue to fight the old fight over land, the rest of the region is clearly moving on, specifically the oil-rich Arab nations. They're resetting their politics and diversifying their economies. The Arab world has started to focus on sports. And the sports industry in this region is expected to grow by 8.7% by 2026. This is according to a new report from PwC. It says the sports sector is slowing down the world over, but West Asia will buck the global trend. Globally, the sector will grow by only 3.3% in the next 3 years. In West Asia, it may grow up to 9%. What explains this? Have people suddenly ditched fuel for football? The answer is yes. If not the people so much, at least the rulers have. They're looking at economic diversification because that's the only way forward. No matter how much oil the Gulf nations have, it is a finite resource. Eventually, even Saudi Arabia's oil wells will run dry. What happens then? That is the eventuality they're preparing for. To make sure their countries aren't left high and dry, the rulers are branching out their businesses. And driving this effort is the oil money. They have a lot of it at the moment. So they're building alternatives, investing in new industries, everything from services to IT to sports. Tonight we'll talk about sports, starting with football. Last year, Qatar became the first West Asian nation to host the World Cup. About 1.5 million fans flocked to the country, 1.5 million. Now this is a nation with a population of just 2.7 million. So it had about 1.5 times its normal population during the tournament. Imagine what this meant for local businesses, for Qatar's tourism industry in particular. The knock-on effects of sports to tourism are huge. And that's one of the reasons why Gulf nations are investing so heavily. They're also trying to attract global talent. One of the most prominent examples is Portuguese legend Cristiano Ronaldo. He currently plays for the Saudi Arabian Football League team Al-Nassr. Now, don't expect Ronaldo's international fans to fly into Riyadh to catch him every week, but you can bet that Saudi nationals are filling the team stadium like never before. It also sets the stage for an expansion of Saudi's local football scene. On the international stage, Gulf nations have been buying football clubs for decades: Manchester City and Newcastle in the English Premier League, Paris Saint-Germain in France. These are some of the most famous examples of Gulf-owned clubs. And this ownership helps them develop local leagues. The effort is not limited to football, though. Off-road driving events like the Dakar Rally are taking place in Saudi Arabia now. The UAE hosts the Dubai Racing World Cup, which is a premier horse racing tournament. And of course, another major sport for the region is Formula One. For over a decade, the Gulf has hosted F1 races. This year's season is already underway. Races in Bahrain and Saudi Arabia have concluded. They drew in a lot of tourists, which is partially why these countries are part of the F1 circuit. Sample this. Sports tourism gives a 30% boost to the hospitality sector. Plus, they're able to attract related businesses and industries. Case in point, Bell Racing Helmets. They've built a 60,000 square meter production facility next to the Bahrain International Circuit. This company is the world's leading manufacturer of safety helmets. Then we have a company in Abu Dhabi, an artificial intelligence company that has partnered with the Mercedes F1 team. The Emirati company is called G42. It will provide Mercedes with data-driven insights. And Saudi Arabia does not want to stop here. It wants Formula One teams to move their headquarters to the kingdom. It wants the teams to manufacture cars and train drivers on Saudi soil. Again, think of how that could boost Saudi Arabia's sports industry. Is it any wonder then that the sports sector in West Asia is thriving despite the pandemic, despite the harsh weather conditions, despite human rights concerns from the West? The Gulf sporting sector looks unlikely to slow down. Our next story is about China's threats and how they're not working. Full credits to China for continuously trying, though. Last year, it threatened the US and Taiwan over Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taipei. Pelosi landed in Taiwan anyway. And now Taiwan's president is in the United States. Tsai Ing-wen is meeting US House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. It's confirmed. And it's only befitting. China needed a dose of reality. It cannot threaten entire countries into submission. In fact, the more noise it makes, the more it gets snubbed. That's perhaps the message that Washington and Taipei have sent to Xi Jinping this time. Here's a report.
Taiwan is on a mission. Its president, Tsai Ing-wen, is on a tour of America, and the purpose of this tour is quite simple. President Tsai is demonstrating that her government has international support, despite China's pressure campaign to get countries to steer clear of Taiwan. This is how President Tsai was welcomed in the United States. Tsai Ing-wen is in Los Angeles to meet US House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. There's a reason why China is so outraged. The US House Speaker is the third most powerful person in the US government after the President and the Vice President. So Tsai's meeting with Kevin McCarthy is quite significant. It's the highest level meeting with the Taiwanese President on US soil. Suddenly, Taiwan has the ear of the US's top leadership. Its President is meeting with the US House Speaker as a sovereign nation's head of state. This is a stamp of authority on Taiwan's independence, which is why China is outraged.
China firmly opposes the US arrangement for Tsai Ing-wen's transit visit and her meeting with House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, the number 3 person in the US government. This act seriously violates the One China principle and the provisions of the 3 China-US joint communique and gravely undermines China's sovereignty and territorial integrity.
China also said that President Tsai and Kevin McCarthy's meeting will greatly hurt the national feelings of 1.4 billion Chinese people. China considers Taiwan its own province and President Tsai a separatist. It promises to reunify Taiwan with the Chinese mainland using force if necessary. It has become a slogan of sorts. The other slogan is this: that China will resolutely and vigorously defend national sovereignty and territorial integrity. It's basically a threat. China uses this statement to harass smaller players like Taiwan. The world saw a glimpse of this last year, right after former US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi left Taiwan. China encircled the island and conducted live fire exercises for days on end. It was simulating a potential invasion of Taiwan. China thought its show of force will discourage countries from interacting with Taiwan, but it miscalculated. The meeting between President Tsai and Speaker McCarthy was supposed to take place in Taiwan. Like his predecessor, Kevin McCarthy says he wants to visit the island. However, considering how China reacted the last time a US House Speaker was in Taiwan, both countries decided that a meeting on US soil was a better alternative. But China is still rattled, and there's no telling how it will react. Will it encircle Taiwan and fire missiles over its skies like it did last August? Last Friday, 10 Chinese warplanes crossed the median line in the Taiwan Strait. This is the de facto border that separates Taiwan and China's air defense identification zones. And on Monday, another package of 10 planes flew across the median line. So there's been a lot of activity in the Taiwan Strait. But China's attempts to stonewall the high-stakes meeting have failed. Both the US and Taiwan have defied Beijing, and the ball is now in China's court.
And now let's talk about the rising tide of global layoffs. Last year's tech-wide reckoning is not letting up, and it's going beyond big tech. You already know this. Layoffs have been making headlines every other day. Only this week, many big firms joined the tide, including UBS, with the largest job cuts globally in the past 6 months. McDonald's, Walmart, Apple, and Highland Software. In the last 6 months, more than 500,000 employees have been sacked. Some are now staging walkouts, others are taking buyouts. It has shaken the economy, which is already under pressure from central banks and fighting a high-stakes battle with inflation. There is a sharper risk of recession, which threatens even bigger job losses. It sounds like a vicious cycle, but this is what we have. Here's a report. The rush of layoffs began late last year, and it is not willing to stop. Since October, over 500,000 workers have been sacked, with over 50,000 jobs lost in 1 week in January alone. And right now, different companies are dealing with this in different ways. Let's look at General Motors. The auto company planned to lower staff numbers in a cost-cutting effort. Now, 5,000 of their white-collar employees have taken buyouts. This can help them avoid layoffs and also save the company $1 billion every year. Meanwhile, fast food chain McDonald's has no such genius plans. It is restructuring the company, which is corporate lingo for laying off people. And they're hiding behind closed doors, literally. McDonald's closed its US offices this week while it prepares to tell employees about their fate. Employees are now working from home, waiting to know if they have been fired. But some workers elsewhere are not taking this lying down. Google plans to lay off 12,000 employees worldwide. That's about 6% of its global workforce. Now there's a dispute. Employees claim Google has rejected their proposals to reduce job cuts. And hundreds of workers have staged a walkout at the company's London offices, just like they did at the Zurich offices of Google last month.
I think what happened is not really fair. It could have happened in a different way, and it's a little bit disappointing to see a company that you believed in so much managing people like that, handling people like that.
It's sad. I think they're missing out on some amazing brains and some amazing minds that suddenly just think, what's the point? This could be me.
It's just been a tick box exercise for the management. We told them that if they didn't fix things, they'd likely to see a lot of individual grievances, and that's happened. It's been very badly handled for a company that once had its strapline of "Don't be evil." It's been pretty evil in the way they've treated the staff. They didn't need to do this.
Layoffs are mounting across industries. The UBS Group is a recent addition. It plans to lay off 36,000 workers, making it the company with the largest job cuts globally in the past 6 months. This is coming on the heels of the Silicon Valley Bank collapse. It happened last month and sent shockwaves through the economy, which has already been shaken by mass layoffs. And UBS is one of the 760 firms who have participated in mass layoffs. As imagined, the tech sector has had the biggest losses, making up about a third of the total cuts. But the damage goes much beyond this industry. Layoffs have been seen in communications, financial, healthcare, and even real estate sectors. And this is happening at an odd time for the economy. The labor market is doing well, unemployment has stayed low, there is uncertainty over recession, but companies overhired during the pandemic, and now the people must pay for it, which leaves employees in a precarious position. Of our co-workers. And now it's time for Vantage Charts, images that tell the story. We're starting with India tonight. A major avalanche has struck Nathula in the northeastern state of Sikkim. 7 people have died. In Peru, many regions are hit by storms and floods. Thousands of homes have been destroyed. In Pakistan, Prime Minister Imran Khan pulled off another stunt, and this one will crack you up. He went to court wearing some very unusual headgear. Apparently a bulletproof bucket that covered his entire face. Imran Khan was visibly struggling to navigate his way, much like his political career. Full marks for creativity, though. It could make for a good Halloween costume. And finally, what happened on this day in history? Winston Churchill, former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, resigned. The year was 1955. Churchill was 80 years old. He was serving his second term. He had suffered a series of strokes since 1949. His ill health forced him to step down. He was a celebrated leader in the UK, but for Indians, he was a racist white man who looked down upon people of colour and their calibre. We're leaving you with this. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
No, I absolutely agree. But the fact is, if you watched and observed the entire press conference, it was almost like he was very reluctantly trying to draw a distinction between Mr. Bommai, who, mind you, has not been declared as the chief minister face yet, who Prime Minister Modi forgets to even mention when he's speaking about B.S. Yediyurappa during the Shimoga event. So
Okay.
maybe this is a sentiment of actors coming in to further prop up a CM aspirant as opposed to particularly working for the BJP, because when asked about Prime
Okay.
Minister Modi, when asked about ideology, Kicha Sudeep did not. He kind of very slyly diverted away from the topic.
Okay, so let me ask Sanju Verma, who's now joining us. Sanju Verma, the contention by the Congress and by Aishwarya Mahadev is that Kicha Sudeep's support or campaigning will be restricted only to Chief Minister Bommai. His support, even in the press conference, was restricted to Chief Minister Bommai. He won't be campaigning for the BJP. He's certainly not joining the BJP or contesting on a BJP ticket. So therefore, whatever little support or support base of his or fan base of his that he brings may not help your party.
Okay. Zaka, first things first. I think Kicha Sudeep has a huge fan base, point number one. Point number two, let's be very clear that, be it sports personalities, be it people from the Hindi film fraternity or from other, areas of artistic domain, people who have a basic connect at the ground level by virtue of, having a huge outreach are always welcome within the political domain, irrespective of whether they follow the Congress or BJP ideology. And I will just give you a small example to buttress my point. If you recall, in Lok Sabha 2019, Urmila Matondkar contested from the Mumbai North constituency. And I mean, we are all aware that Urmila Matondkar has zilch political experience. That was the case even in 2019. And I clearly remember Congress spokesperson tom-tomming the fact that why not have a celebrity, because celebrities do have a natural electoral vote base which the concerned party can capitalize on. And if you remember, while the Congress can scream from every rooftop that the Bharat Jodo Yatra was not a political yatra, the fact of the matter is that each time a C-grade starlet, and I'm not going to mince my words because that is the language that fits certain people, there is Swara Bhaskar, who has no political experience apart from trolling right-wingers on social media, or a done and dusted Pooja Bhatt, who people have all but forgotten about. When these people joined the Bharat Jodo Yatra, I could see Congress, being so happy and actually bursting at its seams, saying that, look, we have Diggaj personalities from Bollywood joining us, and this will lend greater momentum and credibility to our yatra. Without commenting on the credibility of Swara Bhaskar and Pooja Bhatt, my limited point is celebrities who have a natural fan base, irrespective of their political ideology, if they step into the thick of things and are willing to stick their neck out, then it certainly helps the relevant party. And by the way, Kicha Sudeep has said that not only will he, campaign for the incumbent chief minister, Mr. Bommai, but he will also campaign for candidates who Mr. Bommai supports.
Okay.
Which basically means the entire BJP in Karnataka upcoming.
So Aishwarya
fair and
Mahadev,
square.
couple of things. One, on this Bharat Jodo point, what Sanju Verma made, please respond to that. I mean, you had either yesteryear stars or stars who wouldn't be called A-listers join Mr. Gandhi in his Bharat Jodo, and you guys made a big deal of it. Kicha Sudeep clearly is a far bigger star than any of the Bollywood personalities who joined Mr. Gandhi in the Bharat Jodo Yatra. That's one part. Please answer that.
Good evening, hello and welcome. You're watching The Right Stand here on CNN News 18 with me, Poonam Burde. 14 opposition parties knocked on the door of the Supreme Court wanting relief in what they claimed was persecution of opposition leaders by the centre via investigating agencies like the CBI and the Enforcement Directorate. Congress, TMC, BRS, DMK and the RJD were among the parties who urged the court to frame pre-arrest guidelines to prevent misuse of investigative agencies. But unfortunately for the opposition, the Supreme Court bench led by Chief Justice D.Y. Chandrachud refused to entertain this plea, leading to it being withdrawn. Abhishek Manu Singhvi, the Council for United Opposition, listed statistics to point to low conviction rates in cases filed by the ED and the CBI. But the CJI was clear that just because of some figures and statistics, investigation cannot be stopped. Now, if you recall, opposition parties have hit the streets on multiple occasions. They've raised slogans both inside and outside the parliament. They've cried witch hunt, that their leaders are being questioned, some of them being jailed. But there seems to be no takers for this narrative. Even the courts of the country would not entertain it. So what exactly happened in the Supreme Court today? Let me break it down for you. Here's what the opposition said. Counsel Abhishek Manu Singhvi said there's a 600% increase in cases that have been filed by the CBI and the ED ever since the Modi government took over. What the Supreme Court said is that the conviction rate is generally dismal, so you can't point out to those statistics to want these guidelines. The opposition said that out of the leaders that are being probed, 95% are from the opposition, which is why this looks like a witch hunt. To which the Supreme Court said that political leaders are basically citizens, and like any other common citizen, they too cannot have any protection as far as investigations like these go. Now, the opposition's plea said that they're seeking guidelines from the Supreme Court, an overall guideline, so to say. To which the CJI said that politicians cannot claim higher identity. They are on the same standing as any other citizen of this country. The opposition said the statistics show a harassing effect. To which the CJI-led bench said that you cannot have a different procedure for netas and everybody else in this country. The opposition then pointed out at mass arrest. They said that this is a threat to democracy. To which the Supreme Court said that this petition by parties, not by someone aggrieved, which is why we cannot pass an order. If you come individually or if a group of pleas come to us, then we'll consider it. But overall, a preemptive order cannot be passed, is what the Supreme Court said. Now, this is a definite setback for the opposition, but they believe it's not the end of the road.
The court felt that this is too large a matter to lay down general guidelines. They have categorically allowed the withdrawal of this petition, not passing any adverse order. I repeat, not passing any adverse order. If we get new causes of action or new persons or new reasons, it can be filed again. So clearly they have not entertained it at this stage. A skewed non-level application of agencies like, or misapplication of agencies like ED, CBI, etc. The figures published, which the court accepted, showed 95% misuse within the political class only against opposition leaders.
Now, the Council for the 14 opposition parties argued that the government was violating the triple test that's laid down by the Supreme Court for arresting the accused persons. It requires reasonable grounds, it requires necessity and proportionality. Abhishek Manu Singhvi said that many opposition leaders were being arrested without any evidence or justification, and that was affecting their ability to perform their duties as elected representatives. The Chief Justice, however, was not convinced by this argument. So here's why this order is extremely significant. Number one, the top court will not entertain a petition that wants to save politicians. That was made clear today. Politicians have also been put on the same standing as common citizens. You cannot have different yardsticks, was the message that came to the fore from the Supreme Court. They also said that they will not stop investigation just because the conviction rate is low. If there are allegations that are leveled, then they will have to be probed. That was the message that came to the fore from the highest court of this country. But the door is not completely closed, as Abhishek Manu Singhvi is also saying. He says there was no adverse order. They asked us to withdraw the petition, which is what we did. So now, has this put an end to the noise around agencies being misused, that allegation, that narrative that we've seen, especially in the last couple of months? That's our focus on this edition. Tom Vadakan, spokesperson of the BJP, joins us on this broadcast. Leader of the BRS, Vishnuvardhan Reddy, is with me. Kapil Madan, lawyer and political analyst leaning towards the Congress party, is also with us. And lawyer Ashish Dikshit is also with me. Now, I'd like to make it clear that the Congress party was sent an invitation for this particular broadcast, for this debate, but unfortunately they did not want to participate. I'd like to open this up with the BRS's leader, Vishnuvardhan Reddy. Do you see this as a big setback, Mr. Reddy? Because even the courts will not entertain a petition that wants preemptive guidelines to be set just for politicians.
Good evening, everyone. See, I'll have to disagree with you because with all due respect to Honorable Supreme Court, the Supreme Court had made it amply clear that it had given full liberty to the opposition parties to come back with new grounds, new facets and new merits. So it's not done and dusted, and it's not an option that's not available for the opposition. But the Supreme Court did also mention that individual cases based on merit would be looked into, would be supported and protected if there is any merit in those cases. So the opposition leaders will continue. We still have faith in our judiciary system. We will continue to approach the courts and we will try to seek justice.
Sure.
Having said that, you made a statement that political opposition parties are making a witch hunt and by the Modi government and making a lot of hue and cry. But let me remind you, when Honorable Prime Minister Modi ji was the CM of Gujarat, he did make these sort of statements, calling CBI a caged parrot or calling CBI the Congress Bureau of Investigation. So
yeah, but the CBI was called a caged parrot under the UPA by a court. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is the selective targeting of the opposition leaders is something that's out in the open, that is coming out in public discourse, that's out on public domain. The reason why we are saying is, if you look at the people who joined BJP recently, there is one gentleman called Sanjay Patil who happens to be a BJP MP from Maharashtra, and he makes a statement on the stage in full public view that ED will not come after him because he is a BJP MP. And then there is another gentleman called Harshavardhan Patil, who was a former minister from Congress. He happens to join BJP and he makes a statement on the stage that he can sleep peacefully because he had joined BJP. Now, these are very serious statements being made by the elected representatives who happen to join BJP. And I can take a lot of names. I can take Himanta Biswa Sharma, Suendu Adhikari.
Sure, and that's the allegation that the opposition has been making time and again, that the BJP is a washing machine of corruption.
Absolutely.
Once you join the BJP, then all of your sins are completely forgotten. And Tom Vadakan, I would like to get you in. Sure. Sure, and I would like the BJP spokesperson to respond to that. Tom Vadakan, the opposition does not see this as a setback. They say that there is still light at the end of the tunnel. It's not the end of the road. We can go back to the Supreme Court with individual cases. But how has that fared for the opposition so far? At least in the case of, say, Satyendra Jain or Manish Sisodia. They have been denied bail by the courts of this country. Those are individual cases as well.
Poonam, case by case, if you take it up, they have said that Supreme Court has said, well, if there's a grievance, we'll address it and we'll hear it. That's what they said. And we heard Abhishek Singhvi saying that, well, permission was given to withdraw the petition. So be it, because essentially there was no leg on which this petition could stand. Because their demand was that they should be given some kind of a reservation above the common man, where they are treated separately. If you're corrupt, you have to face the music. Now, whether it's UPA dispensation or NDA, the corrupt will be punished, and it is our policy that we have a zero tolerance on corruption.
So that is our agenda. We have said that.
Sure.
And yesterday we heard the Prime Minister say that at the CBI function very categorically, look, we won't tolerate corruption. You are free to take action against anybody, anywhere. And we'll back you. I mean, that's the position we have had.
Sure.
And as to the question of people coming to the BJP, I mean, it's unfortunate for them that, those who join them and leave them, they say they have all cases. But when they are with the concerned party, there is no cases against them. Suddenly when they turn to the BJP, there's huge number of cases that they discover. Now, this is a double standard, double-edged weapon that they use from time to time.
Sure.
This whole business of washing machine, the narrative that they created. I said that on some other channel, I think. There's no detergent and there's no water in the washing machine. And then they still continue to say, well, you join, then you all join the BJP, where the problem will get sorted. But you don't, because you have something to hide. You are 14 parties who have conviction. People who are, in serious trouble. And then you want complete favor. And what is happening to us in Telangana, for example? What has happened? Our president has been picked up on a very strange excuse that he has leaked papers, as if we had nothing else to do. So when you do it, it's all, when the law of the land takes control, you have all, have all the problems in life, saying that, well, BJP is that and BJP is this.
So that witch hunt allegation does not really have a legal standing is what the BJP says. I'd also like to get in Ashish Dikshit and talk about this petition in particular. Do you think that this petition from the word go perhaps did not have any legal standing or was flawed? The kind of observations that the CJI made, do you think they were on expected lines with the kind of demands the opposition was making?
Good evening, Poonam, and to other panelists. See, in our constitution, one thing is very fundamental. That is the principle of equality. The petition which was filed before the Supreme Court today wanted to create a different class of citizenry for the purposes of politicians. They said when it comes to politicians, you treat us as a separate category and don't arrest us and make a different guidelines, put down different guidelines which are not applicable to common citizens. The Supreme Court rightly said that you are as good as a common citizen. Whichever law is applicable to you, to any common citizen, would be applicable to politicians. The constitutional scheme is such that equality is the basic feature of the constitution, except barring few high constitutional functionaries such as president and the governor. No one is immune from prosecution. And if you have any grievance with regard to that the prosecution is not done in the right manner, there are umpteen number of remedies available in the criminal procedure code, and most of the lawyers do exercise that. And coming to your particular question that whether this petition did not have legs to stand, I also think so that the petition, the manner in which this petition was presented to the court was demanding something which is legally not permissible. To say that you treat me as a separate class of citizenry is something which the Supreme Court will not allow as a final arbiter of the Constitution of India.
Yes, you cannot have politicians being put on a pedestal. That's really the message that came to the fore from the Supreme Court. And Kapil Madan, we had Abhishek Manu Singhvi, the counsel for the petitioners, the 14 opposition parties, go on to list statistics about the number of cases that have been filed against opposition leaders, the ratio that it had, and also speak of conviction rates. Now, the low conviction rate is something that the opposition has always pointed at to bolster their claim that these cases are nothing but vendetta because they don't